Hi guys, this is Matt, the crypto miner. This is the third video of a series of 5 videos. So if you didn't see the first and second video, I invite you to take a look at them. In this video, we're gonna check actually how does cryptocurrency mining work. That's where we are in the process of the presentation. And here is the interesting thing. So maybe you understood it a little bit from what I was explaining before, but cryptocurrency mining, if you have one thing, only one out of those 3 things to remember is the first one. It's transaction verification. Remember, there is no bank in a Bitcoin system. So that's people like you and me who are going to buy some computers and who are going to make the verifications on behalf of the network. So basically, if I want to send 1 Bitcoin to you tomorrow, what's going to happen is that the transaction will be executed. The miners, the people mining, are going to verify that there's no problem with the transaction. Basically, it means that I'm not trying to send 1 Bitcoin to 2 or 3 or 4 people at the very same microsecond, which could be possible because it's all digital, so it could be possible, or that I actually have the money I pretend to have. So if I don't have any money and I try to send 1 Bitcoin, someone should check that it's actually not going to happen. So that's all this process of verification. And of course, there's much more verifications, but overall, verification, verification, verification. And that leads to the transaction security, obviously, because if everything is correct in the transaction, then the cryptocurrency miners are securing the whole network. And thanks to them, the whole network is safe in terms of transactions. And no one can cheat, because if someone is trying to cheat, it's going to get ejected from the network. So there's absolutely no incentive for someone to try to cheat. And the very last thing is that if I send you a Bitcoin tomorrow, it must be registered somewhere. And that's where the blockchain comes in, because the transaction might send a crypto Bitcoin will be registered in the ledger, in the blockchain, in one block. Okay, so that's why you have those 3 main things about cryptocurrency mining. And for performing these actions, these verifications, then the miners will get a commission. Okay, there are 2 types of commissions, and we're going to see them just after. But the first one is about the transaction fee, which is linked to the transaction. So if you remember, I was telling you that there's a small fee, which is always the same, that is paid when you send some Bitcoins. So this fee is going to go into the miner's pocket. And there's also a reward, which was at the very beginning of Bitcoin, 50 Bitcoins, that also goes to the miners validating some blocks. So let's see right now what is the block validation and the blockchain, the way it works with the mining. Now, let's see how the transactions are actually validated by the Bitcoin miners. So it's very simple. The very first thing is the origin of the transaction. So the transaction, if we take the example that I've been giving you, it's me, for example, sending you 1 Bitcoin. So it's a transaction between 2 people, and the transaction is broadcast on the Bitcoin network through the internet, obviously. So the miners are going to receive the transactions and perform some verifications. And if everything looks correct, so if I'm not trying to cheat the system by sending some Bitcoins that I don't own, or trying to send several times the same Bitcoin, then the transaction will be deemed as valid and will be added to a block. And if I'm trying to cheat the system, the transaction is rejected. Okay. So now what you understand is that you have the transaction in the block, and actually the block is filling with other transactions. And at some point, the miners, they are trying to find what is called the block solution. And the block solution is a number that they are trying to guess in order to seal the block and to add it to the list of other blocks. Okay, so that's a mathematical problem that the miners have to solve, okay? And it's very difficult. It's very difficult, so you have a lot of power that is needed, computational power, which is needed in order to find what is this block solution. And on the Bitcoin network, the miners, like they are constantly working to try to find the block solutions and validate the transaction. So they have two tasks. And when the block solution is found, then the block is added to the list of other blocks, and that's why it's forming a blockchain. And the miner receives two kinds of rewards. The first one is the transaction fees that are attached to to the block that they just solved, okay? And also they receive a reward in the form of Bitcoin. So initially, when the Bitcoin was created, for each block validated, whether you have or you do not have any transaction in the block, because you can have blocks with no transaction, it is technically possible, then with Bitcoin, you would receive 50 Bitcoins, okay? So the way you need to think about it is that at the very beginning, so when you had the Genesis block, if you remember, then you would have the first block solved or validated with the solution of the block found, and 50 Bitcoins would be paid to the miner who found the block solution. Then the block is added to the blockchain. Then you have the second block created, and the same process occurs. And on the Bitcoin, what happens is that this process is happening on average every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, you have 50 Bitcoins created on the Bitcoin blockchain, and that is rewarded on top of the commissions or the fees attached to the transaction within the block. And that all goes to the miner who finds the solution, okay? And that's what we call basically the blockchain. All the transaction all together, and this blockchain is visible and absolutely transparent. So you can you can go on the internet and find a list of all transactions since the very, very beginning of the Bitcoin history. Now, there are two main types of mining. The first type is the proof of work, and the second type is the proof of stake. The proof of work, that's exactly what we just explained. In order to get some rewards and to get paid, you need some miners, you need some computers that are going to perform some calculations, first to validate the transaction and see that everything is correct, and second, to find the block solution. Because if the block solution is not found, you cannot add the block to the list of other blocks. It's impossible. So it means you need to compute, and that's why it's called a proof of work. When the reward is given, you had to perform some work. It cannot happen just by magic, and that's why it's called proof of work. The thing is that it's quite energy consuming, but what you need to know is that most of the miners in the world using their machines to validate transactions are using green electricity, renewable energy. That's happening in 74% of the cases because this energy would be wasted otherwise. So that's basically the hydropower energy. Hydropower energy occurs in places where there's a lot of rain. For example, in China, you have a wet season where it's raining a lot. And if this water is not used to produce some energy, it's just wasted. So that's why you have a high concentration as well of miners in China, because the electricity there is cheap. Because if it's not used, like I just said, it's wasted. But that's a good thing as well, because if it was too easy to have this proof of work, then it would not be safe. It would not be safe to secure to run the Bitcoin. So you need a lot of machines to to ensure the security. And the fact that you have to pay so much in electricity and machines and in everything makes it impossible to hack. And that's a very, very important thing when you want to deal basically with cryptocurrencies. And the way it's working in terms of solution and in terms of reward, that's what I explained before, is that only one miner will receive a reward every 10 minutes on Bitcoin. Every 10 minutes, only one person in the world with a machine will receive a reward. And we'll see later how we can change this. The second big system, the second main type of mining is the proof of stake. Here it's very easy to understand. You just need to buy the cryptocurrency and hold it. You just wait. So it's not consuming much electricity, but there are like some problems that the proof of work systems like Bitcoin do not have. And I've shown next to the small picture like a symbol of Ethereum, because Ethereum is changing from a proof of work system to proof of stake. But basically, you can see that the difference is quite small. But it's less energy consuming, which you can think, oh, it's very good. But in terms of security, it might not be as safe as Bitcoin. And they are changing this at the moment, but we are not 100% sure that it will be a better system. So we have to be quite careful with this. And because there's no block reward, you only get the money from the fees collected. So if there's not so many transactions for whatever reason, then basically you are just wasting your time. Now we are going to see some important terms to know. The first one is the mining difficulty. It's something very easy to understand, and it means that the more miners trying to find a solution, the more difficult it is. Because remember, on average, it should take 10 minutes to find a block solution. That's written in the Bitcoin protocol. It's coded in such a way that blocks will be added on average every 10 minutes. It can take 1 minute from time to time, or it can take 1 hour, but on average, 10 minutes. So because it's pure computational power, you can imagine that if you have one computer trying to solve the problem, or if you have 10 computers, well, it won't take the same time. With 10 computers, it's going to be much easier to find the solution. So it won't take 10 minutes on average. So the mining difficulty is a parameter that is increasing with time. And the more miners you have, the more machine trying to solve the problems you have, the more difficult it becomes, because on average, regardless the number of machines trying to find the block solution, it must stay around 10 minutes, okay? But now let's talk about the mining pool. If you remember what I was saying is that there's only one reward which is paid every 10 minutes to the miners who found the block solution. But now there are thousands of people mining. So how can you actually make some money, especially that all miners are in competition to try to find the block solution? So if you start mining tomorrow, it's you against all the other miners. And on top of that, this reward is only paid every 10 minutes. So how do you do? It's almost impossible. So at some point, the miners, they realized that they would not be able to find a block solution by themselves alone. It had become too difficult. So they decided to merge their power and to share their power into mining pools. So instead of being one person against the rest of the world trying to find what is the block solution, all miners are sharing their computational power to find, before everyone else, to find the block solution. So you have different large mining pools now, and you can be part of one of them. And as soon as a mining pool, thanks to your machine and other machine, is finding a block solution, which is still happening every 10 minutes, then the reward is shared between all the miners of the mining pool regarding how much power they shared to try to find the block solution. Okay. Now let's talk about the halving. So if you remember as well, I was telling you that on average, for each block, it's not an average actually, for each block, the miner finding the block solution is receiving 50 Bitcoin. And that was true, but it's not true any longer. That was true at the very beginning. At the very beginning, you find a block, you get 50. So at the very beginning, you had 0 Bitcoin in circulation, 0 Bitcoin. Then the first block was mined and 50 Bitcoins were created. They were not existing and now they are existing. Second block, 50 Bitcoin more, etc., etc., etc. And actually the halving is the division by 2 of the mining reward. So that's happening every 210,000 blocks, which is about 4 years, if you think one block, 10 minutes. So every 4 years on average, the reward is divided by 2. So from 50 Bitcoins, suddenly it becomes 25 Bitcoin, the reward. But you still have the same number of machines mining, but just the reward is divided, okay? So that happened the first time, where the reward was changed from 50 to 25 Bitcoins. That happened a second time from the halving, where the reward went from 25 to 12.5 Bitcoins. And some times ago, it happened again from 12.5 to 6.25, okay? So that's what is called the halving. And all together, with this reward reduced and Bitcoin created every 10 minutes, we will reach someday the max supply, which is the last term to understand and to know. And the max supply in Bitcoin is 21 million, which means that there will be no more than 21 million Bitcoin created ever. And because there's a halving every 4 years, this max supply will be reached in 2140 about. Now, let's see the equipment for mining if you are interested in mining. The very first equipment that existed is the processor, the CPU. So it's the regular computer that you could use some times ago, like 10 years ago when Bitcoin was created. You could use just a computer, okay? Because there was not so much competition in Bitcoin mining. It was enough. It was enough. You could use the computer, mine, validate transaction, run the blockchain, and do everything. But with time, we went to the graphics card. Why? Because it's still computational power. But as you can see on the photo, you can use several of them in series. So with only one computer, you could have several cards like that, mining Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, and it was much more efficient because you only needed one computer, and if you had a problem with a graphical card, you could change it. So it was much more interesting to mine with graphic cards rather than just with a computer. But then there are some guys who invented the circuit board, the printed circuit board. So usually they are for different industry, like aeronautics or car industry. And they said, okay, let's use those things that are able to make even faster computations than graphical cards, and let's code it, let's program it in a way that it's going to mine some cryptocurrencies. So that was a new generation of miners, and it was even more powerful than graphical cards. And if you wanted to mine another currency, you could program again, reprogram the board and start mining another cryptocurrency. And then finally, they invented the dedicated machine, which is called the ASIC. And this one is only able to mine one type of cryptocurrency. So a machine like you can see on the photo can only mine Bitcoin, or the one that you can see me with a machine. I think it's a L3, and this L3 machine can only mine Litecoin currency. So you will not be able to mine Bitcoin with this type of machine. But the main point about this, you're going to say, okay, so what's the point of having this if the previous one that we saw just before, I show you again, if this one, you can program it again. But the thing is that this one is extremely good at doing what it does. So it's much faster than the previous technology. The inconvenient, well, you can only mine this type of currency, but you can make much more money than with the previous generation. And you can see the size of this machine. So it's not very big, and it's about 10 kilos, 8 to 10 kilos. Now let's see the mining farms. So if you are not familiar with mining farms, these are the places where you will install this type of machines because they make a lot of noise, they heat, they need some internet, they need plenty of different things. So there are places where you can install those machines, and they are called mining farms because instead of having a cow producing milk, you have a machine producing Bitcoin, and they are all aligned like you would have cows aligned in a farm. And that's the main places you can see on the map where you can where the Bitcoin miners are installed. And basically, it's where the electricity is cheap because those machines, they produce some commissions. You understand that with the reward, the fees from the transaction, that's the money that goes in the pocket of the miners. But they have some fees as well to pay. And the main fee is the electricity because they are computers in the end. They are machines. You need to plug them, you need to pay for electricity. So that's the main thing. And if you have a high electricity bill, then the commissions you're going to get from mining is going to be ridiculously low compared, or even negative compared with what you get. So it will not be profitable at all if your electricity is too expensive. Now, here are some photos about some farms in China. So that's when I visited the farm with my partners. Well, you can see that it's something extremely professional. So you have ventilation systems, which are actually super huge because the temperature needs to be quite low. Otherwise, there are machines running 24/7 at high speed, high power, and they would just burn if the temperature is too high. And you can see as well that they are all installed like in racks. This is also a photo from the outside. And this is one of the farm where we have our machines. So you can see there are several buildings. Of course, there's security. Everything is made like for mining in an optimal way. And when we went there, you see there were more buildings, like many buildings. And that's the dam where we get the electricity from. So I'm going to give you now 3 reasons why you should mine cryptocurrencies. The very first one is that thanks to you, the cryptocurrency network is more secure and the whole thing is automated. So you don't have to do anything specific. You just get the machine, you plug it, and that's all. That's all. The next one is that the cryptocurrencies, and I think it's even more interesting for you, is going to disrupt the future of money. And you don't want to miss this. You want to be part of that because if the price of Bitcoin is multiplied by 10 or 20 or 50, which is not something completely impossible, it happened in the past. So it can happen again. It is possible. Then you don't want to miss this because it would be like, I don't know, like missing all the things that happen on those big startups like Google, like Amazon, in which you may not have invested at the very beginning, and probably not. And at the moment, we are still at the very beginning of cryptocurrencies, so you don't want to miss that. And the last thing is that you have very high return on investments. Like it's much higher than any traditional investments. Of course, there are some risk, but the thing is that it's paid regularly. So it's something extremely interesting. And even if the price falls, so because you get commissions, even if the price of Bitcoin is dropping, you will still get some commissions. The thing is that if it's dropping too much, then you might not be profitable, but you can just switch off the machines and then plug them back when the prices are high again. But even if the prices are not falling so much at the very low this year, we were still making money. We were still making money. And while some people may have invested in Bitcoin when it was 10,000 and lost money, we were still making money. And that's something extremely important when you want to mine cryptocurrencies. High return on investment much higher than traditional investments, and even when prices are falling. So mining is very profitable, but it's not something easy because you need to find and to buy some equipment, and you need to be careful with the scammers because even some large websites, they are selling machines and you don't really know where they are from. So it's very difficult, and also sometimes, or sometimes most of the time actually, the machines are extremely expensive. They are expensive because the people who buy the machines, they don't know necessarily what is the real price of the machines, and the margins are fantastic on this business with the people selling machines online. So it's something very difficult if you're an individual to try to find the cheap machines. It's almost impossible. But let's say you find some cheap and good machines. The next problems that you will face is to plug them to an inexpensive source of electricity. Because if your electricity is too expensive, the price is too high, well, all the profits that you make will go into paying the electricity. So in the end, you will be mining for nothing at all, and you will never refund the price of the machines that you purchase. Then you need to connect the machines to the internet. So if you have one machine, it can be okay. You have one machine, you plug it to your box, it's fine. But when you start having 2, 3, 10, 20, you start understanding that it's no longer the same infrastructure. And on top of that, when you have 20 or even just 5 machines connected, like they are 2000 watts each, that's quite a lot. It's like 2 microwaves running 24/7. So how can you manage that? It's just impossible. And the next problem that you have when you want to be mining is the temperature. You saw the size of the fans, the ventilation, the fans, the ventilation in the mining farms. So it's something extremely serious. The machines, they must stay at low temperature, otherwise they will just burn and your investment is gone. Or you need to fix the machine, so you need to send it back where you bought it. And obviously, who's going to pay for the shipping? Well, it's you, obviously. Then you have the noise. They're extremely noisy, those machines, very, very noisy. And then you need to provide maintenance, obviously, because they are mining machines. So that's why we have prepared an offer like Summit Mining, and I'm going to introduce that to you in the next video.